Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Tucker Carlson Today here on Fox Nation. We're grateful to be doing this, grateful to have more time, grateful to be outside the normal limits of 5-minute segments and get more deeply into the subjects that are completely changing the world and of interest to you and to us. We had a broad range of possibilities for the first person to talk to as we begin this new show, this new series. But really, in the end, there was only one choice. The one person we know who has crystal clarity on what's happening, not just in this country, but in the world, someone who's watched it and chronicled it for years now. His name is Douglas Murray. He's a Brit. He's the associate editor of The Spectator in London. He's the author of the fantastic book, The Madness of Crowds, Gender, Race, and Identity. And we are really pleased to have Douglas Murray join us here on the set. Douglas, thanks so much for doing this.
Great pleasure.
So there are a million places to start. There are so many things happening. I want to look a little more deeply into one story, into several facets of a story in the news today, because I think it might tell us what's happening more broadly. And it's a story of a woman called Amanda Gorman, who is a poet. She's 23. When she was 22, she gave the inaugural poem at President Biden's inauguration. The key thing to know about Amanda Gorman is that she is the representative of an oppressed group. That is the way we are introduced to her in every profile. Amanda Gorman, in addition to being called Amanda, is the product of the most expensive private school in Los Angeles, $42,000 a year for 13 years, Harvard College for 4 years, a semester abroad in Spain, all paid for by others, no student debt. In what sense is she oppressed?
Well, obviously the age we live in has a strange value system. Many of us grew up in societies where we admired people who were brave or heroic, who strove to show people the way to be brave in their lives. In our own lifetimes, this has changed. Now, if you want to be a leader, you have to show that you are an oppressed minority. You have to show suffering. You have to show beleaguerment, that everything's been done against you. People are meant to not admire heroism, but to admire suffering. And so we have created a suffering Olympics, where even very, very privileged people wish people not to recognize their privilege, but rather to think of them as being downtrodden. And this is just this era's passport to elite success.
It does seem like sometimes the most privileged spend the most time telling us that they're oppressed. And I guess that's what's so bewildering as you watch this.
Yes, and of course it's an impossible game, because we could point out that this is nonsense. We could just say, I don't recognize your right to claim victimhood. You seem not to me to be a victim. But then there are clever little things you can do as a part of that. You can say back to that, well, I'm part of X oppressed group. So even though I might have been lucky in my life, I'm part of a group that can give me the passport to elite success by being oppressed. There are other ones like this. People can say, oh, I've got mental health, as if everybody else doesn't have any mental health issues. You can do various things like this, but the point is to show yourself to be the most oppressed person so that you win. And then you can tell everyone else what to do. And Amanda Gorman has this to an extraordinary extent. It's almost as if the whole thing of her doing this alleged poem, just a list of banalities really at the inauguration, was almost just, I dare you to criticize this work. There were people who criticized the poem who immediately were lambasted for criticizing it. How dare you criticize the poem? Amanda Gorman, by any normal measure, has, as you pointed out, had a much luckier life than almost anybody in America. But if you point out that even you don't like the poem, it doesn't seem to rhyme, doesn't seem to scan, doesn't seem to be memorable, you're doing that against somebody you're not meant to criticize, because the person you're criticizing can claim oppression. This is an irreducible game. I mean, we could all play it. It's just that I think decent people wouldn't and shouldn't.
What does it do to art? I mean, if you care about, I actually like poetry, and I think it's interesting, it's important, it's difficult to write. If you tell a population this is beauty, this is art, when it's so obviously not, what does that do to art?
Well, our age has decided that beauty isn't very important. It's decided that political banality is of utmost importance. that your life will find meaning if you demonstrate and wave placards and much more. I think this is a horrible view of life. It's a radical left view of life that thinks that you'll find meaning by protesting and yelling. These people forget that actually I think nobody on their deathbeds looks back at their life and thinks, I wish I'd attended that protest. I wish I'd made more placards. Wouldn't it have been good? No, most people on their deathbeds regret they didn't spend more time with loved ones.
Yes.
So the whole sense of what's important in our society has changed radically and in an ugly direction. It makes everything political. It wants to politicize everything. It wants to politicize art. It wants to politicize poetry. All of the things that were meaningful in our lives have been picked up and spun through this cycle of politics. And it's boring, it's ugly, and I think that it's the job of any sensible person to say, I refute this. I refuse to join in this game. I refuse to have this vision of life. I have a better vision of life and how it should be lived, and we should assert that.
I want to get into that in much greater detail, but I want to ask you one last question about this Amanda Gorman story. And by the way, I'm not attacking Amanda Gorman, whom I don't know. And I always admire young people who are successful, almost no matter what they do. However, there was a story in the New York Times yesterday about a new controversy surrounding her work. And it's this. Foreign publishers, her poem is apparently about to drop 150,000 copies, I think by Viking. And it is being translated into other languages, Dutch among them. And the Dutch publisher hired a Dutch translator to translate the poem into Dutch. Yes. But the Dutch translator was white and was fired for that. Only a black person can translate a black person's poem.
Yes.
What does that tell you about where we're going?
I think also, didn't the Dutch translator, they were thought to be perfect for the job because the Dutch translator is a they-them person.
Right.
Had come out as non-binary or look at me, as I say. The translator had come out as they/them, and so therefore should be perfect to do the translation, except that then it turned out that the translator was white. Now, if that's the road we're heading down, this is a dark, dark road. You can play racial equality, but the only alternative is racial supremacy. Racial supremacy runs if you believe that one group actually ruins things by even being. And this current form of racial supremacy that's running rife across America asserts not just that black people and white people are equal, it now says, it's now moved to the next stage, which is to say, actually, white people spoil everything. They wreck things. They can't even be a translator in Dutch of a black person's poem because they will ruin it. Now, there are several problems about this. One is it's just flat out racist. Another is that it pretends that there is experience that cannot be understood across racial group lines. As if a white person, by the way, there's nothing particularly complex about Amanda Gorman's poem. I mean, it's not as if there are sort of subtleties about it that need to be teased out. Most of it could be translated by a high school student who was proficient in a couple of languages. No, what this says is that the thought of a black writer is of a kind that a white translator couldn't appreciate. Well, in that case, white people and black people can't understand each other. And where do you think that will go? You know, this is the darkest road, and we are being led along it by people who pretend to be anti-racists. And they're not. They're racists. They're racists. They happen to have come along this time under the guise of anti-racism, but they're racists. If they think that white people and black people cannot understand each other and we cannot speak across boundaries, then there's nothing left but war, hatred, oppression, bigotry, and much more. And I think that anyone, black, white, any other colour, should say, no, we're not doing that. We're sitting this one out. In fact, we're going to do more than sit this one out. We're going to fight back at that. We're not going to play that game. We know where it leads, even if you don't. So I very much hope that people realize what these so-called anti-racists are doing, the walls that they're building, the divisions that they are embedding and forcing on a new generation of Americans. And I hope that more and more Americans just step away from that, opt out of it, and call it out.
How do you do that?
Everyone can do it in their own lives. My experience is that people shouldn't expect the cavalry to come to save them. I think the discovery of middle age, apart from anything else, is that the cavalry is you.
The cavalry is you. That is true.
It's first, it's a hilarious thought. Secondly, it's a slightly depressing thought. Thirdly, it's a worrying thought. But nevertheless, it's the case. You are the people who get us out of this. No one else does it for you.
So in practical terms, that would mean if you have children in a school whose curriculum has changed dramatically since the death of George Floyd, and you find your kids being subjected to this, you stand up and say no.
Yes, and also have confidence, intellectual confidence, moral confidence, to say no. We knew until yesterday this wasn't the case. The death of George Floyd doesn't demand a rewrite of American history. It doesn't demand that there should be a rewrite of American education. It does not make America the country which its detractors and defamers, principally from within America, now pretend it is. They have no right to do this. They have no right to make Americans forget their own history or rewrite their own history or lie about the history. They have no right to make Americans feel disdain for their ancestors. They have no right to do all of these things. And I think that the American public, and everyone in their individual way, can say, no, I know something that we all knew until yesterday, and I will not be made to forget it. That can be rejecting racism even when it comes under the guise of anti-racism, or it can come in just saying no when it comes into your own life. When stupid people tell everyone else to educate themselves, when the least educated people in your society lecture the most educated and tell you to be smarter, have some confidence. Say, no, I'm not listening to this. I don't need to. I don't need to be talked down to in these terms. I'm not a bad person. I'm not a bad person because of my skin color, and I don't think anyone else is either. People just need to have a bit more moral confidence in America. Where did it all go? When did you lose it?
I think this every day. What do you think the answer is?
Oh, I think that America, for a generation or more, has had an elite that doesn't like the country, doesn't feel that you're very good. That's not unusual. I'm from a continent where there have been an awful lot of people who've taken that view. It's very hard for a society to do well if most of the people in a position of power and authority basically distrust the public. But the saving grace of it is the public, is the people who hold on to truths that their elites disdain, who remember things that people in power have forgotten, who hold on to truths. That has seen this country through in the past. I think it can see it through again. But you need not to be bullied. You need not to be bullied by people who pretend to know more, and who almost never do. Not be bullied by people who say, well, I've got an MA in genderqueer theory, and so I know about this. Have the confidence to turn around and say, with all due respect, I don't think that means you know anything. If somebody says, well, I've studied post-racial, biracial politics at several liberal arts colleges, and I've made myself completely unemployable, then don't say, gosh, please tell me more about how I should live my life. Just have the confidence to know that you're a good country that's been a force for good in the world. You've made mistakes, as all countries and societies have, but so what? Who's doing the judging here exactly? You have to work out the difference between people who are critics and people who are enemies. A critic, a real critic, wants you to improve. An enemy wants you gone. And you in America seem to have lost the ability to differentiate between these two things. If somebody says they want to pull the whole thing down, don't listen to them. If somebody says they would like you to slightly improve, then it might be that they've got a point. But if they want to pull down the whole damn thing, Get them out of your way as fast as you can.
How do you tell the difference between a critic and an enemy up front?
Oh, you can tell it immediately. And we all do in our personal lives. If somebody said to you as an individual at a party, say, said that you just had no redeeming features at all, you know, didn't like your look, didn't like your clothes, didn't like your family, didn't like your friends, didn't like where you lived, didn't like your neighborhood, didn't like your neighbors, went on and on and on like this, would you at any stage think, I must listen to this interesting person? Or would you think, what a nasty piece of work. How can I get away from the situation as soon as possible and make sure I never, ever encounter this person again? We would do that in our lives, so why can't we do it as a nation? Why can't we recognize that when people say there's nothing good about America, they're not a critic who wants to improve you? When they say pull down capitalism, let's decolonize everything, all those other things that people have come up with now to try to intimidate Americans, why don't you realize if these people like nothing about your past, nothing about your present, and have a future vision for your country, which is a nightmare, that you should treat them like the person who says to you as a person you have nothing good about yourself. Ignore them. Move on. Find something better to do. Find better friends. Find better critics. Find better people to listen to.
And say it out loud.
Oh, yeah. Don't keep it to yourself. There's so many bad things happen simply because people are intimidated. I don't think we need to be intimidated. I don't think Americans need to be intimidated. They don't need to be intimidated by these race hucksters and these oppression mongers and these elites of anti-elitists and much more. The American people don't need to be intimidated by this. The American people have been proud. They have got a lot to be proud of. They've done an immense amount of good in the world, historically and now. The #1 country in the world in economic terms. And among other things, you should simply turn around and say to people, who do you want to be the top dog, by the way? I mean, that's a question I've often asked throughout my career. You know, if you don't like the American hegemony, to use one of their favorite watchwords, what's the one that you'd like most? I mean, let's say, would it be better if it was the French hegemony? I mean, it's not likely, but let's take one that's quite likely. Would you prefer the Chinese order in the world? You know, you who go on and on about human rights, would you like it if the country that was most important and strong in the world was the Chinese? What do you think they would say when you came at them with your rights? I can tell you what they'd say. They'd say, how interesting. So don't make out as if this is the worst situation. Don't make out as if the American situation with America being the most powerful society in the world is the worst situation imaginable. Just work out what any of the other options would be. And have some humility about that. And not just humility, but gratitude. I mean, I say this quite a lot, but where did gratitude go in the last generation? You know, oh, society isn't exactly what I wanted. I don't get to do everything I want. Everything isn't always offered to me. By the way, that, of course, to go back to the thing with Amanda Gorman, that's an impossible to play game because you could have been given so much in your life and you can still play the resentment game if you've been brought up to believe that resentment's the most important factor in our lives. But how about gratitude? How about the amazing fact that we live in a society which basically has law and order? I mean, we have a court system, there's a justice system. The police may get things wrong, but they're not institutionally corrupt. They don't go and just shake down people at their houses every day. I've been to plenty of countries in my life where that is the case, where to get the most basic thing you have to bribe a public official. America doesn't have that. That's pretty good just to start with. People care when you talk about rights being infringed. That's pretty good just to start with. I've been to plenty of countries in the world where you could talk about your rights being infringed, your life being taken away. Nobody would give a damn. That's a pretty good place to start with America. There's a lot to feel grateful for in this society, even before you get on to material wealth. So where's the damn gratitude? Where did that disappear?
Are we the victims of our own affluence, do you think?
No, it's not just affluence. You can be affluent and not have these views that now run rife in America. There's a form of moral obesity in society. People have become, they just imbibe, and they never think they owe anything back. They never think they owe anything to anyone else. There's a deep problem in America, and it needs to be addressed. You need to solve it. And everyone tends to say, well, it can be solved by education. Well, it can only be if the education is good. And the education in America, frankly, today is rotten. It's rotten from the school system to the college system. You pump out people from colleges who are stupider when they leave than when they went in. Parents remortgage their homes to make their children more reprehensible by sending them away to college for years. You send people away and educate them to hate their country more. You give bursaries to people who will come out the other side of it disdaining the country more than they did when they went in. Something's gone wrong. It's badly, badly wrong. But everything that has gone wrong can be righted. You just have to want to right it.
And you have to say it out loud so you know what it is. I wonder, does it take, as you suggested a second ago, a kind of a decision by a lot of people to stop participating in a system that's destroying them and their families? Why haven't we seen that yet? And are you confident there will come a point where people will peacefully and respectfully, civilly, but still firmly say no? No mas.
It may happen, it may not. I mean, nothing's written, is it? Nothing's inevitable. Everything hinges on brave individuals. Brave individuals. I don't mean famous people or anything like that. I mean brave individuals, brave Americans, brave people who just speak up in their lives. And I think that if enough people did that, something would happen. But you know, good people tend not to organize. It's one of the things I've learned. People with bad ideas are very good at organizing. They're very good at making placards. They're very good at cohering. They're very good at shouting the same banality over and over again. Good people don't do that because they tend to believe that communication matters, that in fact shouting the same thing over and over again is an insult to the listener. It presupposes your listener should be beaten down rather than engaged in a dialogue, in persuasion. So a lot of Americans are just silent because they're not going to organize and have their voice heard in a mass demonstration or a protest. But perhaps more important than that is just how people make their voice heard in their lives. Nothing saddened me more in recent years than hearing from American friends how hard it is just to be at a dinner table with relatives and friends these days. How hard it is to talk now in America. That's my experience. I was in America in many states before the election. I found that Americans couldn't even talk over a dinner table together anymore. I think it was P.J. O'Rourke who said somewhere, you know, everyone always wants to save the world, but no one will help mum do the dishes.
Yeah.
But how about more Americans learned how to speak to each other again, rather than learning how to shout at other people in the street? That'd be a start, wouldn't it?
People are afraid.
They are, but I think that the fear is overstated. My experience always is that people say, oh, I'm worried about saying this thing, I don't know if I should do this. And I've always said, you know, you have two options in your life. One is to say the truth as you see it, and the other is to grow to despise yourself more and more. So if you don't want to despise yourself more...
Can you repeat that? Because I want that to be on refrigerator magnets across the country. Do you know what refrigerator magnets are? I don't know if you have those.
I personally don't have them.
I don't either, but will you just say... That's such a wonderful explanation.
No, I mean, it's true. You either speak the truth as you see it, or you grow to despise yourself. And you can see the result of that in people who hollow themselves out. They become cores of human beings because they never spoke. They never really trusted themselves or the people around them to say things honestly. But being truthful is something that's worth doing. It's worth doing for yourself, and it's worth doing for your society. It's worth saying, I'm not going along with that. All of the history of dissidents in countries that have real oppression problems, all of them have been solved by, or at least on the way to being solved by just individuals, not famous individuals, but people who became famous because they said, no, I'm not going along with the lie. I'm not going to do that. There are some remarkable people all across history, some of whose names are remembered and some of whose names are only remembered in the societies which they're from, but history is filled with people who just said, no, I'm not going along with that. And they turned out to be right, even if they were the one person in the million. But the oddity of this age is that it's not about one person in a million. It's about millions and millions of Americans who know that what is being fed to them is untrue and who still fear speaking. That is a big problem. But it also is clearly an answer. That it doesn't require people to take many, many leaps forward and do wildly heroic acts of self-immolation. It just requires every American to step up a bit. Just to step up a bit. And if that happened, if everyone just did that small step, being a bit more honest, saying, no, I will not be browbeaten, I will not be intimidated, I will not be told to educate myself by the ill-educated. If everyone did that a bit more, it'd get a bit better.
Where do you get the courage or the resolve to tell the truth?
Well, several things. I mean, one is I just really don't like lies, and all my life I've just hated it when somebody says you've got to agree to this thing which I know not to be true, and I haven't been very good at agreeing to things that I don't think are true. The other thing is that it's not as bad as people think. I quite often get people saying to me, well, it must be hard for you saying this. I'm not, I have had down moments, but broadly speaking, I've had a great time. I get to say what I think. I annoy all of the right people. I can point at things that are ludicrous and laugh at them. I can laugh at ludicrous people. When people who are clearly ridiculous say, how dare you ridicule me, I think, well, why not? There's nothing I'd rather do. So I think too much emphasis is made on the beleaguerment of people who say what they think and who go against the flow and who go against consensus. I think that's overdone. I think it needs to be stressed. Actually, no. I mean, the water's a lot warmer than you're told. It's not the case that there's this sort of terrible road of suffering which you must go down if you reject the race baiters and you reject the identity politics identitarians and you do all of these things. It's not the case that there's just a veil of suffering. If you go down this road, actually your life will be better. You'll make better friends. You'll meet wonderful people. You'll meet heroic people from an amazing range of backgrounds and identities and much more. You'll be able to enjoy yourself. You'll be able to laugh. You'll be able to tell the truth as you see it. You'll be able to write well. You'll be able to do a whole load of things. Whatever you want to do, your life will be better. If you set off down the road of telling the truth, your life will immeasurably improve and it'll get better and better all the time. And if you say, well, I'm worried about losing these friends, lose those friends. For God's sake, lose them as fast as you can. Drop them. Drop them because they clearly don't want you to do well. They clearly don't want you to do well. The sort of people who say, I have a problem with that. You should have a problem with people who say that. You should want them out. The people who pretend that they know better than you how you should live your life. Get rid of those people. Move on from them. Clear them away. You're going to have a much better time if you do. And the people who say, oh, you've got to educate yourself. Ask them where the capital of any major country is. Just give them a test, Ask them anything. Anything. Ask them if they've ever read a long book. Try them. See if they can spell. Do something like that before agreeing that those people have the right to rearrange your brain and your life. Have some self-respect, America. Come on.
I'll be totally blunt. I was feeling pretty down this morning. It's Monday morning. There's just too much. And that was an answer to prayer, that conversation. That was just one. That was genuinely inspiring. I'm so glad that you came.
It's a great pleasure.
Douglas, thank you.
Thank you.
Tucker Carlson Today is the name of the show. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday here on Fox Nation. And of course, we'll continue coming to you every weeknight, 8 p.m. Eastern. Tucker Carlson Tonight on the Fox News channel. We'll see you then.